Quiet, numbskulls, I'm broadcasting.
This talk you may not hear anywhere else. It's All Politics Are Local with Barry D.
I am back and ready for another All Politics Are Local show, which has not been exposed by Doge for wasting money, so it looks like my budget of $1.42 a week won't get cut.
All right.
I am sitting in Chester County's only AM and FM radio station, located on the 17th floor of the WCHE Studios corporate building at 105 West Gay Street in Westchester, exactly one block from the Market Street Grill, located at 6 West Market Street in Westchester, which is right next to the Farmers and Mechanics building. On that Google, it is described as having hearty portions of creative breakfast and lunch fare that comes from an upscale diner-like setting. Two things I know about this place. There was a film crew there the other day shooting for a new Casey Costigan movie, and that it closes at 2 p.m. So you've only got a couple hours to get over there and grab something to eat. Another... that was premature registration. Another shameless plug from one of the neighboring businesses. You may ask, Barry, what have you got on the agenda today?
Not really.
Yeah, I think I used to date her. She still sounds the same. I have my monologue. There is not 5 minutes with Jack today, apparently because he made somebody mad at work and they sent him to Detroit, and nobody goes there voluntarily. I have no Carla with Chester County Ramblings today because she is working on a couple new reports that just aren't quite ready yet. But I do have 2 in-studio guests. The first is Eric Olson from the Honeybrook Sewer Authority, who's here to counterpoint last week's guest. Plus, I have Jenny Hines here to talk about the hurdles of being in agriculture here in PA. At the boards is Eric Clambera, a guy who I would trust with my life.
That's pretty hard to believe.
Yeah, well, my life's worth about 60 cents in a Wrigley Spearmint gum wrapper, so I don't think it's a reach. The fact is, Eric is the guy that is both one hell of a dynamic board operator and makes a really good glass of water. You ought to try sometime. So what more could a radio show host want, right?
If there was a problem, yo, I'll solve it. Check out the hook while my DJ revolves it.
Eric is also available for DJing at your next Square Dance event. It's time to head back into that time machine called our memory. That's right. You know how we all wistfully harken back to a simpler time, a time of less pressure, less aggravation, and less political correctness. Well, I'm here to deliver that to you with a commercial from Bud Light, a company that at one time made commercials that most people laughed at, and a few others that didn't like it. It didn't matter. That was back when Bud Light made money because it had good marketing. My, how things change. Let's travel back a quarter century and relive those days for just 1 minute.
Bud Light presents Real Men of Genius.
Real men of genius.
Today we salute you, Mr. Restroom Toilet Paper Refiller.
Mr. Restroom Toilet Paper Refiller.
Without your undying commitment, we might find ourselves trapped in a stall, armed only with our newspaper.
Oh, I need you now.
Like a brave soldier, you storm hostile territory, delivering much-needed supplies to your men. Should you leave 1 roll, or 2, or perhaps that giant 10-pound super roll?
Keep rolling.
While others rest, you can't, because somewhere there's a guy with his pants around his ankles doing the bunny hop in search of a fresh roll. So crack open an ice-cold Bud Light, master of the men's room, because if you don't do your business, we can't do ours. Bud Light Beer, Anheuser-Busch, St. Louis, Missouri.
You know, Eric Seinfeld had an episode about toilet paper like that. That was really a funny one. It's now time for my monologue. Let me just jump in real quick and make something very clear. Mr. Olson is not here representing the sewer authority. He just happens to be on the board. He's representing himself on this. So, now it's time for my monologue.
I'm trying to think, but nothing happens.
Last night, there was an issue on the Route 30 bypass, the westbound side, just before Route 322. Apparently, there was a spill reported by Irish Eyes to be about 150 feet of chicken guts, which made for a slippery and hazardous road condition, but I am assuming it's cleaned up by now. Little public service announcement. If you are expecting a chicken gut Amazon order, you may want to file a never received claim on that.
Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
A quick shout-out to PennDOT for pothole repair in West Brandywine Township. 2 weeks ago, I mentioned a tire and wheel-killing pothole on Springton Road, which would be State Road 4021 to you technical gurus of the highways out there. And it was on a bend near Kimberwood Circle. If you came into that turn heading north, you would never see that pothole, but you'd likely hit it and hit it hard. Anyway, I drove by the other day to check it out, and it's filled. So thank you to PennDOT. Another PSA on this. Remember, call 1-800-FIX-ROAD and be clear and concise about the location of the road hazard, whatever it is. Cursing and inflammatory remarks will not get it repaired faster. In fact, probably the opposite. Now, it's been my experience that I don't perform better when people are belligerent. But maybe that's just me.
Ain't nobody got time for that.
Get your friends and neighbors to call to make it a priority. Now, I have to ask, what's going on in the world today? In London Grove, a man has since been apprehended. He was throwing incendiary devices into a convenience store. Now, some term the items explosives, but since the store burned, it sounds like the intent was not explosions, but to burn the place down. And you know what? My mom always said, if you're going to be good at something, if you're going to do something, be good at it. He was successful. He burned it down. He wasn't successful at the carjacking, so apparently he needs practice because that failed.
Funny situation, ain't it?
It certainly is. What's going on in this world? How angry do you have to be about your local Quickie Mart hot dog not living up to your standards to burn down a business? And, you know, they're a pretty low standard right there to begin with. But seriously, people have lost their minds, that they're blinded by some kind of rage or revenge, and I have no idea what, to try and kill a couple convenience store workers, destroy a building, and then attempt to steal a car and get away. Is all self-control just gone for some people? What kind of tipping point did this person have to go over the edge like that? I guess we'll find out, since the article says he's now charged with aggravated arson, attempted robbery of a motor vehicle, attempted kidnapping, and the article leaves it with, and more.
Don't drive angry. Don't drive angry.
Meanwhile, in Euclid Township, somebody forwarded me a Euclid Township tax bill. And here's the following breakdown. I know nothing about Upper Euclid's tax rate, so they sent this to me, and I just thought it was of interest. The rate for the Township general purpose tax is .085 mils, which in the case of this property is just a little over $18. I don't know the value of the property, but that seems inexpensive. Follow that with a hydrant tax bill of .055 mils, which translates to about 12 buckaroonies. Again, sounds pretty cheap. And last but not least, in a couple different ways, the bill for emergency services is a whopping .3 mils, almost $70. How is that possible that a bill for emergency services is over 3.5 times the general fund tax? That's amazing to me. You know, I'm going to break this down. I spoke about this before pertaining to Ludwig's Corners Fire Company looking for more money from West Vincent Township, a municipality where the fire company is located. And the township donation seems to be a little on the light side for the amount of calls the station responds to in relation to the other townships that pay into it, which would be Upper Euclid and West Pikeland, I think, maybe Nantmeal. Recently, the Euclid Ambulance Corps Station 87 came into West Vincent, came to a supervisor meeting asking for a lot of money because they need to replace equipment. When the township said they would not increase the donation, the Euclid Ambulance Corps notified West Vincent it would no longer serve the residents of West Vincent Township. Now, according to the Euclid Ambulance Corps, they describe themselves as a non-profit organization committed to saving lives and improving the quality of life by providing 24-hour emergency medical response, outreach programs, and education for community members and healthcare professionals. Both of these operations are out there saving people, but as I have said before, the question is this: why are people not donating? People move out here from the city and think it's in the taxes. They figure they pay for the service. The fire company is volunteering, getting more difficult every year to get volunteers with all the training required to come out there and do the work for free. The ambulance corps has people that are paid, that are standing by all the time at the station, ready to dispatch, making sure that residents don't pass over to the other side. And by that, I mean die. But less and less residents care until it happens to them. Look, if you don't care to donate, totally understand. Some people can't. You know, it's tough for me some years. I do my best. But make sure, like I do, that my car, health, and home insurance, at the very least, is able to cover the expense of the ride to the hospital. That's in my insurance. How is it that your life and your time is more valuable than the very people that are saving you? I mean, really, these people are out there. This is their job to do this, and they don't get paid a lot. So this takes me back to, of all things, the wisdom of the Bud Light commercial I just played. The person that refills the toilet paper holder is a nobody. Maybe that old guy, the one that everybody thinks is a little crazy, talks to himself about his time in Nam. People don't even think about him except on the occasional wisecrack they make about to each other's, their friends. They're kind of like, Joe, he's a crazy one, isn't he? And then the day comes when you go into the stall, and when you're all done, you realize there's no toilet paper. Then that nobody is the most important person in the world to you. So you better start appreciating these operations, or every township will be invoking these taxes. Plus, you will get a bill for the services on top of that. Nothing is free. And if these operations can't service a call quickly, when seconds count, it could be the life of your loved one that slips away. Yeah, could be you. And who are you going to be mad at? Not you. You'll be mad at the emergency services that couldn't get there fast enough. And whose fault is it really? Think about it. I mentioned Doge at the beginning of the show, and I did want to just say that sometimes funds come into our municipalities and it's considered free money. Because it didn't come from our municipality. It came from the state or the federal government. I hear this all the time. Well, where'd the money come from? The taxpayers. Just not directly out of the coffers of your own township or municipality. We've all joked about money wasted by the government. A block of cash gets sent out to either a governmental or non-governmental operation. And there, after that, no accountability for how the money was used. Many times, there's a use it or lose it clause, and no municipality ever wants to send it back. That's their free money. Why would anyone want to send it back, right? Who gives up free money? In West Vincent Township at the end of 2024, they still had a chunk of unspent COVID money given by the feds that they had to use or send back. What did they do with it? They gave substantial bonuses to the road crew employees, union employees that have negotiated under a union contract with the township, which includes how much they get paid. Now, I'm in no way picking on the West Vincent road crews to simmer down anybody who's getting upset now. I want to talk about precedent. Several years ago, a supervisor in West Vincent wanted to incentivize good performance by saving township money and proposed a program that gave bonuses for doing just that. That makes sense, right? You save $100,000, you distribute 10% of that. It makes all the employees want to work hard, be actual participants, investments in getting the most out of your tax dollars. But as I remember, now I could be wrong and somebody could correct me on this, but as I remember, the legal advice that came back was that you really couldn't do that for the very reason I stated. Their contract was negotiated with the union, and that's their pay. So to do so would be actually a violation of the contract. And that came from a lawyer that specializes in employment law. Now, I could be a little fuzzy on that. I'd have to go back and check my notes on it and make some phone calls. But that's the way I remember it. And I could check some videos, too. Now, flash forward, and not only did the township give the large bonuses that really shouldn't go to the union employees, this was COVID money that was blatantly given away. This use of its disbursement had nothing to do with the effects of COVID on the finances of the township. Nothing. The money should have been returned to the federal government. Instead, it was like a Christmas present. Well, it came out at the end of December, so why not, right? Everyone needs to think about that. Now, this happens all across the country in every facet of government. Do the multiplication and be astounded. We've all joked about government waste for a century. And now, some people are actually angry that that waste is being looked at. Well, I just gave you one tiny, little, small example. And if you're okay with that, you're part of the problem of why we as a country are so far in debt. And if that's the case,
my advice to you is to start drinking heavily.
Because we are so close to the financial tipping point in this country, if it isn't fixed now, we will soon be past the point of no return. I, for one, am looking forward to the day the news can show the U.S. national debt clock slow down and then actually reverse.
Funny situation, ain't it?
Bugs is back. Hey, we're going to take a break. I'm going to be back with my first studio guest for today.
Barry D is back with All Politics Are Local.
All right, I am back. My first guest today is Eric Olson from Honeybrook. He heard last week's interview and wanted to clarify some claims that were made on the show. And as my regular listeners know, my microphone is always open to get the truth out there. So if there was something from last week's guest that was incorrect, I certainly want the listening audience to know there is another perspective, on any issue or situation. Now, I have not spoken to Mr. Olson about what's on his mind, so both the listener and myself are going to hear his view for the first time. I typically check a lot of things to make sure I clarify them. Afterwards, I look them up, and I'll do so with this, as I have my guests in the past. But, I have no reason to believe that he's going to say anything that's untrue. Now, Eric, I have some theme music for my guests, so since you are coming on to clarify some points, here you go. All right, so tell me what you have. You contacted me and sounded pretty disgruntled over some things that my previous guest said. I'm from your demeanor, you've calmed down. You look passive. You look, calm. You're good to go on that. So tell me what you got. You got your notes there. It's good. That keeps you on track.
Yeah,
you got about 10 minutes.
I've got some notes here. I appreciate you having me on so quickly, and I think the entrance song is quite appropriate. There's some stuff. Yes, I was pretty much ready to set some stuff on fire.
That's why the emergency services tax is in place.
Yeah. So, we'll talk about. Well, I'd like to start off with the magic beans I supposedly have. D.R. Horton being able to get magic EDUs. So the actual magic beans is D.R. Horton was forced to pay to have a study done by a third-party company on the affected section of the sewer system to determine the exact amount of EDUs that system had capable, and then they were given the amount of EDUs in response to what's available from the study that was paid for.
Well, this is good, because you're the person in the know on this thing. How many EDUs does Honeybrook currently have? Honeybrook Township.
Total EDUs, I don't know the total EDUs, and Honeybrook has several legs that feed into one station. So D.R. Horton is attaching to one leg. So they had to pay to have that leg studied to determine how much it could handle.
Okay.
And then from that study, the sewer authority determined how many that we were willing to let them have.
But unless they're processing, they have the plant only has so much unless it goes into expansion.
The plant has plenty of room for growth. We're not, and the plant is updating itself to come into compliance with the EPA. It's not being updated to expand capacity. The plant itself has always had enough capacity. It's just coming into compliance for output in certain times of the year. Cold weather affects the chemical output. That's what the money that is being spent on the plant is going to.
But you can still only do so much disposal, and that's what I'm looking at. Because
we're not even
any
anywhere.
Plant like I'm dealing with Euclid, Upper Euclid right now on that.
Yeah.
So
we're nowhere near capacity.
Okay, so you think maybe 400 EDUs? Because an EDU typically is for one house.
One EDU is for one house. Now the capacity, I did not reach out to our plant supervisor or the engineer firm we have to get total capacity numbers of the plant. I just wanted to respond to. Okay, that's fine. That's fine. And D.R. Horton is going to use how many EDUs? I think like 132 or something. Somewhere in that range. Okay, so their proposal is 132 houses. Yeah, something like that. I don't. So the D.R. Horton proposal has been ever changing since the beginning of its. Like you and your previous guests spoke out, they originally wanted to bring in some 400 plus homes, right? And now it's back. It's down to this 130 range. Okay, there's no the magic beans was literally just the company was forced to pay to have a study to determine how much flow. And then right across the street, they're also developing too, right? That's an extension. Is that an extension of the trailer park or what is the mobile home park? It's a redevelopment. There was a mobile park there. Oh, okay. So they're building. That has been torn down. Okay. And brought back in. They're going to have new homes. They're cleaning that property up It's not a new development. It's just a
okay. Yeah, because I saw the excavation there
yep.
on 322.
Yep.
Okay, I was wondering about that. So okay, go ahead.
So and then it was my qualifications were called into question, and the answer the previous guest received is really the only answer that she deserves. But I'll clarify my qualifications. I also have a degree in science from college.
Okay.
Imagine that. She's not the only person that has a degree in Honeybrook.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty must be pretty surprising for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
I also have 20 plus years in installing, maintaining, and repairing septic systems.
Okay.
So, there's that. And I also have a history of working with people in Honeybrook through other organizations. I was a baseball coach for both of my sons' baseball teams. I served as a Cub Scout master for years. So, there's qualifications there.
Okay. Well,
and none of that,
fine.
and none of that really.
Yep. That's good. I'm glad you said that, because from what she said, the answer was
I knew septic systems.
You knew septic systems and stuff or something like that. It would have been nice to have more of an answer. I mean, any public person would have wanted, more of an answer.
Well, only a public person is trying to twist the system and manipulate something.
Okay.
Someone who believes that there's some wrongdoing.
Okay.
And you and the previous guests were talking about what the supervisors can and can't do, and
mm-hmm.
I'd like to remind people supervisors aren't omnipotent. They don't have the power to just make decisions like they're gods.
Right.
They have to make decisions based on, first of all, established law and
mm-hmm.
established procedure, and decisions that represent the whole community, not just a handful of the community.
Right. That's true.
The sad part is a handful of the community just refuses to accept the answers that they're given, and don't believe that they're being serviced properly and represented properly. And the truth is there's more than a handful of people
mm-hmm.
in Honeybrook, and they all have to be represented.
Sure. Well, unfortunately, the problem is, and I see it far too often, not even labeling your township, because I've never been to one of your township meetings, but I do visit other townships, and I do get a lot of calls in from people, and I do check things out. And I have about 25 years experience with local municipality things. Far too often, it happens, and again, I'm not labeling Honeybrook because I've never been to Honeybrook, but you get a group of people in there that manipulates the system, and they're supposed to do the right things, but they don't. And I could give you some stories that would make your hair curl.
Oh no, I agree 100%. There are many. You can go back, and there's plenty of people abusing power. But when there's no abuse, and you're shown there's no abuse of power over and over again,
mm-hmm.
You maybe should just stop looking for it.
Okay, fair enough.
Keeping an eye out on your local politicians is absolutely the smartest thing to do, because they're representing you. And if you don't pay attention, yes, you do get bad players. But if you don't have bad players, why accuse them of being bad players?
Okay.
And there's some other stuff. They talked about land preservation. So here's some numbers. Honeybrook is a little over 16,000 acres in total. Farmland use in Honeybrook right now is a little over 11,000 acres total. Mm-hmm. That's farmland. That's not developed property. That's farmland. So you're looking at almost 70% there. Preserved property through the programs, you're a little over 5,000 acres.
Okay.
And there's another just about 300 acres pending.
Mm-hmm.
So I believe Honeybrook in whole is doing a pretty fantastic job of keeping development from running rampant, and keeping the farming going. Because there's a large Amish community there. Everybody loves the Amish, and the total worth of the farming is really appreciated in Honeybrook.
Okay.
Again, back to laws. The township has to, for development, this, has to have areas by law that allows development of all sorts. It's not a choice that the
Well, it has to be designated.
It has to be designated.
It does not have to be developed.
It doesn't have to be developed.
You can have transferable development rights, and
they have to have areas for that.
Ag preserved.
Right.
It does have to be located.
Right.
You know,
so you
want to keep industry out. You zone a development. Industrial. Well, nobody's ever going to come in and mow it all down to put in a tire plant.
Right.
So that's the type of thing that is. So, but you do by law you have to designate for everything.
Yes, you have to designate. And Honeybrook does, I think, a fantastic job of zoning. To keep ag as prominent as it is.
Mm-hmm.
Then you got, there's the skateboard park. I tell you what, that is one of the most spectacular skateboard parks you're going to find in Chester County or even the Tri-County area. It's a fantastic park, and the development of that park was set in motion probably close to 15 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the current supervisors and governmental staff in the township, they've gotten a grant to repurpose the basketball, resurface the basketball court, and involve this park.
Yeah, see, I didn't even realize that was Honeybrook Township. I thought that was the borough because it's so close to the borough. We got to take a quick break, and we'll come back. I'll give you another 2 or 3 minutes to wrap up on the other side. Let's hop off, pay a couple bills, and we'll come right back.
Barry D is back with All Politics Are Local.
All right, we are back with Eric Olson from Honeybrook giving his perspective, countering my guest from last week. We've gone into a little double overtime here. I'm going to give him another 2 or 3 minutes to talk about what's on his mind, what's got his craw. Go ahead.
Yeah, Barry, thank you. I only really have one more thing to touch on. I believe it was you that said this. Words matter.
Yes.
And that's absolutely true. Words do matter. But they only matter if they're the correct words spoken to the correct person. If you say the wrong thing if you say the right words to the wrong person, or the wrong words to the right person, you're not going to get the results you want. But if you listen, you might get told where to get the results you want. So take example, you're complaining about a road that's controlled by the state and managed by the state, and you're told that unfortunately we're not in control of that road and there's nothing we can do about it outside of reaching out to our state representative or senator, which has been done.
Mm-hmm.
And you're suggested to do the same thing. Like you had spoken earlier, you reach out, report a problem, the state will respond. If they don't respond, you keep reporting the problem until they do respond.
Right.
It's one of the old adage, squeaky wheel,
Well, that's exactly it. You got to get in there and you got to keep reminding people.
You just gotta squeak at the right people.
That's right. That's absolutely true. That's absolutely true. Well, listen, I appreciate you coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and I'm going to go over this because I need to listen to the old, show to compare the notes to it and come up with what I can for the listener and find out exactly what's going on there.
Yeah,
so,
in all reality, Honeybrook's a great place to live.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I'm out there 2-3 times a week.
There's plenty of stuff to do, plenty of food.
Mm-hmm.
It's
always that, man.
Oh yeah.
You got Jerry's up there at the corner. You got the Chinese restaurant. right. We got the Waynebrook.
You got September Farm. You got Greenside Grill. You got Suburban Brewery. And there's Honeybrook's.
And what's the diner?
Honeybrook Diner.
No, what's it called? Wimpy and D's.
Wimpy and D's.
Wimpy and D's.
Well, I call it the Honeybrook Diner because I've been in Honeybrook my whole life, so it's always going to be the Honeybrook Diner.
Not to be confused with the Honeybrook Diner that used to be across the street where the pond was, where they used to actually fish out the snapping turtles and make fresh snapper soup. Remember that?
I do. I even remember Carl's Diner.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
You want to talk about a place to get a good greasy breakfast?
Right. Exactly.
You
remember it all day.
Yeah.
Well, after that, we're going to take a quick commercial. We're going to switch out guests, and I thank you for being here, Eric.
Thanks for having me.
I appreciate it. Take care.
Barry D is back with All Politics Are Local.
All right, I am back. I forgot to mention that I reached out to all the Honeybrook Township supervisors 5 days ago, and none of them responded to me. He was the first one to actually, of any people to ever come on this show to counter any of my guests. And so, yeah, right? So I'm very interested in that. I thank him for coming out here, and I'm going to look through a bunch of things. I want to listen to that last interview and see exactly what it was. I think what we have here is a he said, she said thing, but we're going to find out. Going to see exactly what it is. I'll update you guys next week. So, my second guest for today is Jenny Hines, who has a small farm in Modena, Pennsylvania. Blink and you miss it. Modena is so small at 222 acres. It is just 1/3 of a square mile. I think that her property constitutes over 10% of the overall land area in that borough, and I'm pretty sure it's the only farm in the municipality. As I said earlier in the show, I usually have a theme song for my guests, so here goes.
Here's to the farmer that plants the fields in the spring, that turn from green to that harvest honey. Hold one up for the banker downtown that got him on his feet with handshake of money.
All right, Jenny, do you know who that is?
Sounds like Toby Keith.
Luke Bryan, 2016, Here's to the Farmer. It was a country song that hit number 33 on the U.S. country charts. And, I can say that because I have it written down right here. That talks about the work and the issues of the American farmer, what they face, and that's what you're here to talk about today, right?
Yep.
Okay, so let's get started with this thing, huh? You want to come on here, and I think it's great that you're here because, people mostly just think about food coming to the table, right? They don't really know anything else.
Very disassociated. And Pennsylvania is obviously one of the original colonies. It dates back to 1682. This area of Pennsylvania, the founding of the nation, we were farmers.
Mm-hmm.
And in 1683, the colonial Pennsylvania legislature passed a law that required you to grow hemp, which was used for paper and fibers and food source and fodder for animals. So I think our society's gotten a little removed from the farmer.
Don't forget rope.
Yeah. And and Pennsylvania's great because it doesn't differentiate between a small homesteader, because you've got farming and homesteading is under that, that you can be a successful farm. For example, horticulture is really big. Cut flowers on a 1/4 acre.
Right.
And it just looks at, do you make $2,000 per year? Do you estimate? Versus all the way up to the larger farms. And in this area, Iron Springs Farm is one of the largest farms in the area.
Mm-hmm.
So Pennsylvania.
And what do they do?
They do a variety. They're known for their sport horses, dressage, jumpers. They have cattle. They have sheep. They grow hay. So there's.
If you go by and you hear the sheep go Barry, just ignore them.
I will. And so people don't realize there's just such a large diversity in farming. Pennsylvania even recognizes worm farmers, composting. When you have, even, for example, R&H Tree Service, they are an ag producer, logs, clean wood chips that help build soil health.
Yes, trees are a crop. A lot of people don't realize that.
They're harvesting. That's one of our crops is forestry. Pennsylvania is now pushing agro-tourism because it's such a big diversity. So it's everybody from like us who are, and most of the farms in this area are regenerative agriculture based. So that means we look at the environment as a whole living, breathing organism. And we just don't respond to things like stopping flooding. We're restoring the soil health. Because, for example, if you add 1% of compost to an acre, that allows the absorption of 25,000 gallons of rainwater.
Wow.
And sequesters it into the soil and helps refill wells. Like, for example, right now we're in a drought. Chester County has been in a severe drought for all of the summer. And the soil health, trees, and vegetation are important for that rain cycle.
Yeah, we didn't get enough snow to recharge it from last year.
Or the rain, because we don't, as Chester County and Delaware County has gotten more development, that affects your rain.
More impervious surface, too.
Yeah, and it just runs off. They just run it off into whatever they divert it to. It's usually, we say here along the Brandywine, down the hill to the people down the hill, and that's where it ends up going. So it doesn't get to absorb like the snow we had this past winter. That water did not absorb into the ground. It was so cold, it solar evaporated. So
yes, I noticed that.
Anything.
The ground never got wet. It just evaporated over a period of days. Yes.
But it's like everybody, I am seeing a huge surge in all people, all demographics, whether it be urban, suburban, rural, for any type of farming. And when we talk like Pennsylvania, when you're talking farming, agriculture, that could be you, Barry, growing your own vegetables, having your own chickens, and even
you know how many people are growing have their own chickens now?
Yeah.
It's unbelievable.
Also fights Lyme disease because Pennsylvania is #1 for Lyme's disease, and chickens eat the ticks, which helps fight Lyme's disease. I have chronic Lyme. So that's one of the many bonuses, and people are starting to learn, and I think the public doesn't know in general. We have a Right to Farm Act. We have an Acres Law, which protects, and these laws, when you talk about municipalities, they're supposed to check with our county planning commission, because none of your municipality's laws, regardless of your type of municipality, cannot violate state law. If they violate state law, they're illegal. The laws are unenforceable.
Now, you're in Modena.
Yes.
Modena, because it's a borough and you have density, boroughs and cities do not typically allow farm animals, but in Modena, they do. I think you have to have more than 4 acres in order to have that.
Well, technically, the law violates the Right to Farm and the Acres Law.
Okay.
So they're not.
Because I do know people down there that have had to get rid of their turkeys and their chickens because of that.
Yeah, because, and I've spoken with so many different people between the county, the state, the feds, also a prior attorney that used to work for the Commonwealth, because you can file a complaint with the Pennsylvania Attorney General's office and they will sue the municipality. That they can't say you can't do that. That's because even talking with, I've had people that have called me, they're like, yeah, we called over, like you said, to the county planning commission, and the first thing they said, well, they can't make that law. It's illegal. It violates the state law. So I think it's more education, and also I think you have laws that were passed back beyond current people sitting that they didn't realize under Pennsylvania law, they have to run all the laws they propose by the Chester County Planning Commission, in our case, to make sure they don't violate the law.
Well, and the regulations stick until somebody challenges them. That's one of the big
exactly.
things.
And, our state's pretty interesting because under its Title 35, elected officials have an obligation. They cannot infringe upon your constitutional and your property rights. And it's called official oppression in Pennsylvania.
Are you saying that somebody in Coatesville that lives in a row home can have chickens?
If they sell the eggs and they estimate.
Really?
If they estimate.
Well, it's fascinating.
And there are people in Coatesville City that do. And it's like one lady had told me, and she does. She's in Coatesville City proper. And she goes, they talk about food insecurity, but heaven forbid me, as a citizen, raise chickens to actually feed myself.
Right.
To help feed my neighbors.
Weird, huh?
Because growing and raising your own food is freedom.
Right.
And it's helping your community.
That's true.
That's what she's a pistol.
Let me take a break here, and we'll come back after about 2 minutes because we got to pay bills. That's our food security, right, Eric? So hit those commercials.
Barry D is back with All Politics Are Local.
I am back, and I'm with Jenny Hines talking about farming, and she just grooves to that song. Do you know what that is, by the way?
No, but it sounds good.
Yeah.
Sounds like from my childhood.
It would be from your childhood. Yeah. What year were you born?
I'm a bicentennial baby.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, you in your teen years. It would have been in about your teen years or your tween years. So we'll get to that in a minute. You'll learn all about that. So, and you're going to go, oh, yeah, now I remember. So We were just talking about raising chickens in your backyard of your row home in Coatesville, and that there is legitimacy for that. Now, I know that the roosters are verboten because of the noise.
Well, see, that's the thing. Once you have a certain amount of acreage...
Yeah, well, that's right. You have to have acreage.
Certain amount, but even for smaller things, and I always find it so ironic. They complain about the sound of roosters, but they didn't care when they have all the overdevelopment and the big rigs coming through and whatnot. That's what kind of perplexes me. How can you be upset at a rooster? I hear dogs barking all the time. I get up very early, but people have dogs, and it's their right to have dogs, And roosters...
but you can be fined for... disturbing the peace. If the dog barks all the time, they can come after you for that.
I find more disturbing of the peace, the big, all the overdevelopment and whatnot, and the roads breaking up.
That comes and that goes. But, and we can talk back and forth about it. By the way, I just got a text. Somebody already needs to meet with you. So, they want to talk to you about cool. some acreage things and stuff like that.
Oh, that's cool.
So, And she's interesting. She develops biogas.
Oh.
Yeah, you'll get a kick out of her. So, and I keep talking to her about coming on the show, but she has her stuff all over the world for like Somalia, where instead of them chopping down trees to make charcoal, they do biogas through waste.
Yes.
And they can develop enough to then burn clean methane for their cooking stoves instead. Fascinating stuff.
It's amazing. Regenerative agriculture, especially.
Yeah, she just said shameless plug. That's right, Janice, I'm talking about you.
It's amazing. And I have found that so many people now want to learn. They want to know. And there's such a supportive, and it doesn't matter if, like me doing, plants, horticulture, floriculture, firewood, logging, or whether it be Bailey's Dairy with milk and meat, we support each other and we help those that are interested. And the better way to bring back communities too, because even I've talked to previous owners of our farm, they were the bakers. They had community picnics up at the farm, on Sundays. You'd have all the people. And it brings back that caring, because I think there's, regardless of who, what, where, when, where you stand on politics, food, the environment, taking care of each other are common things that, bind us together.
That's absolutely it. By the way, before we jump onto something else, Clarkson's Farm, you a fan?
Clarkson's Farm.
You never watch a show? Jeremy Clarkson?
Oh, he's in England.
Yeah, he has 1,000 acres in the Cotswolds.
He's very entertaining.
Oh, he's very entertaining. Very controversial, but a damn funny show. And it shows how difficult it is to farm, especially in England.
Yes.
Those guys get beat to death. And Jeremy Clarkson from Top Gear, lots of money, and he's hated by the town. And he's a blowhard. But in the end, you see what it takes to run a farm.
To do it.
Most farmers have a second job. They can't just farm.
All of it, 80% of farmers work. I have to work off the farm because...
Doesn't make it.
And that's why it's so important to buy local. Like 100 years ago, less than 100 years ago, all flowers in the cut flower business were domestic. And now over 80% are imported. And with those imported flowers, you've got chemicals, you've got pests coming in like, lanternflies and stink bugs and stuff. Huh? But also, there's also ethical concerns with the work conditions of those that have farmed those blooms.
Well, it's funny you say that, because that's an interesting point, in this new administration where they talk about this type of stuff. And that's, a lot of that stuff just isn't fair to American farmers or American industry, that you have things that are made by basically slave labor.
Exactly.
And they have terrible work conditions. And if a guy dies, well, you give the family $230, which is the value of his life for the rest of his life, and they move on. And I think that's absolutely horrible. And there's some real legitimate arguments that the Trump administration has about that.
Exactly. And also when they were talking about floriculture, there was a study, and this articles went back even into the early 2000s, about the sexual assault of female workers in Colombia and children. And it is, and they're exposed to these toxins. Like you think of our Victorian area and the ladies that got sick from the powder that they put on their face.
Lead-based.
Yeah, and it's the same idea. But everybody, you hear people say, we want to support farmers. The best thing you can do to support a farmer is to go buy those blooms from them. Go buy that milk from Bailey's Dairy, because that money is going directly to them. It's not being spread out between transport costs and whatnot.
Right. Intermediaries are what run your costs up.
And meat, Spring Hope Farm, Jake Yo, you can get beef, amazing beef. There's so many chicken farmers around, and there's a lot of people now that are doing their own hatcheries, because you see with transporting the chicks, they die in transport. So people are having hatcheries, which you can do on very small acreage. And it's
who doesn't love some peeps running around?
Yeah, exactly. And it just everybody is starting to understand that, and the native plants, how it helps pollinators, and
by the way, the foxes like the little chickens running around too.
I know they
really
do.
Appreciate that.
They do.
I had a friend of mine who was decimated by that.
And that's why people are like, why don't you have chickens yet? Well, it's called getting a good setup, because we have things called red-tailed hawks and bald eagles that think they're delicious along with foxes.
There is a great company that makes chicken coops right up on 322 heading towards Honeybrook on the right-hand side, mainline structures. They have chicken coops up there, and they are beautiful. It's a good price. Anybody who wants to get involved, that should go check those guys out.
And get involved in your local 4-H. And also, I encourage everybody.
4-H right up heading towards Honeybrook.
Yep.
Same thing, right-hand side.
I encourage everybody, run for your local elected offices. Get involved. It's supporting farming and homesteading and agriculture is supporting the environment. It's supporting your local communities. It's making a difference. And it's so important.
Real quick, jump into this, because we're going to run out of time. And Eric, this is obviously something that's going to take more time. Is it possible for us to go back to Studio C and do an extended podcast?
Surely you can't be serious.
No, I am serious, and stop calling me Shirley.
I'll allow it.
Thank you.
He's the master of the control board. Without him, I'm nothing. I'm not. It's like a witch without a broom, I tell you. I'm just a hitchhiker then. Real quick, because we only have about 2 minutes before I have to close this part of the show.
Yes.
And for the listening audience, and then they'll be able to hear the extended version on the podcast in about 24 to 30 hours. Give me a very abbreviated description. What's the difference between farming and homesteading?
So,
or is it too complicated for me?
It's basically they're one and the same. Farming is usually just larger scale. So a homesteader has more different components. Like, you'll probably see them have chickens. They might have a hog that they use for meat. They also raise cattle. They may have more of a their own little sustainable system.
Okay, so more homesteader is feeding the family and maybe a couple neighbors. And farming is on a bigger scale. Okay.
But bigger scale is subjective, because like I said, in Pennsylvania, somebody with a 1/4 acre, and it's on up. And when you look at like places like Modena, wonderful community that was built, you had the paper mill and then the steel mill, but it was all homesteads and farms around. And that's what made it so special, because everybody was looking out for each other, because, you knew that so-and-so down the street was going to butcher their hog, but you had cattle, so you flipped.
Right, you could trade. Yeah. Hey, give me some pork chops, I'm going to give you a couple sirloins.
Yeah.
All right, so we were talking about the homesteading and, of course, the farming.
Yes.
And, of course, there's your difference between the two, which is homestead is kind of like a little family operation, and farming is a more expanded operation, right?
Yeah. Homesteading is, it's more, you see more touches on the different elements. Like, usually when you think of farming, you think of 1, 2, 3, maybe even 4 main types of farming. Like, for example, Longwood Gardens is actually technically farming. It's horticulture.
Sure.
It's horticulture, and that's what they do.
Right.
Versus, for now, to show a diversity, which you could say Bailey's Dairy being a farm also could be considered a homestead setup because they do dairy cattle, they do meat, they do pork. They also sell chicken there and other home goods.
Right.
So,
all raised there, though.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
So let's talk a bit about government policies, okay?
Yes.
So, there's a lot of issues with government policies that sometimes government gets involved in things and they're not as good as you would think they are. They're trying to help, but it just doesn't happen. Talk about some of the impact from government policies.
And a lot of government policy, you see a lot of it being hypocritical. Mm-hmm. And they label, farming, you're horrible, blah, 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 and you destroy the environment. Well, your farmers are regenerative. They're improving the soil health, which absorbs the comment I had made before. Mm-hmm. And this is backed by the USDA, who studied that you add 1% organic matter, which is compost, clean wood chips, etc. That the rain,
it's like nature's vermiculite.
Yes, absorbs 25,000 gallons of rainwater. Mm-hmm. Buildings, asphalt, concrete, parking lots, malls. That doesn't absorb it. They just push it off. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't matter what their quote-unquote engineers do. It's pushing it down the line. So communities like me, and I always said, it's not if.
Well, you are up on a hill.
We're fortunate. My friends would be killed if the 2 dams above us broke. They would die.
Yeah.
Because they keep flooding the water in to the bodies of water there, and it's only a matter of time before they give way. And what happened in Asheville, North Carolina, could happen in Parksburg, Coatesville, Modena, Newland Township, Pocopson, because you're just dumping this water in, dumping it downhill. And
it's gotten pretty tough down there in Modena. I remember passing over the bridge there on Union Street, which runs right down through the middle there, which is a new bridge. I remember when they built it, they put the old county placard on it, but because it was originally built in like 1911 or something. But when they rebuilt it, they put that there. But Hurricane Floyd was the old bridge, and it came within probably 2 or 3 inches from hitting it, and it would have pulled it off its pilings. And then Ian did the same thing. The difference was Ian's was fast and furious because all that rain happened within like 12 or 13 hours.
Yeah.
Where Floyd took days to accumulate all that water.
And it all runs downhill, and people don't realize that, for example, up on the Fallowfield end of Woodland Avenue and South Coatesville end, they allowed all that clear cutting. They even took up the stumps. So all that water just runs downhill. And those houses already flooded because now you have the developments that were put above and it comes down. So now there's nothing to absorb and stop and hold that water in place.
Now, I hadn't been that way in a long time because they closed that road a long time ago. But I was doing a little jog across and I couldn't go up Hepzibah Hill Road. So I had to take Woodland, which I didn't realize had been repaved, which is beautiful, by the way. And then I came to the top of the hill and saw the new development. Now, there's not a house in there yet, right? It's just they've taken everything out. It's just dirt and it's and an entryway that's paved, and that's it, right?
That's all they put in, and it's stone. And
it's stone, right?
Yeah.
Well, when I say paved, I just mean a hard surface of some sort, right? Okay.
And I find it so ironic because last month you had somebody complaining about the Cheshire fox hunt and how it's bad to animals. Folks, those developments, they are bulldozing over animals. They're killing them, running them over. Eagles, owls, foxes, all of them. So if you're a conservationist and if you're an animal rights activist, you need to start speaking up to them. They are literally crushing animals to death to build that. And people always say, we need more housing. Just a little fun fact, because I research, and Barry will tell you, I sit there on my phone and I'm researching as I'm filling water troughs. That we have 15.1...
Big water troughs, more research.
Yeah, yes, exactly. 15.1 million abandoned or vacant properties. And they're all over. And they're different classifications. Some may be former industrial, some residential, whatever. We have that many properties. homeless, and I'm going to round up, the homeless in the United States is about 700,000 people. That's roughly what, like 19 homes, quote unquote, for one person, one homeless person. So that's something to think about, because they like to use those terms. They'll use, we need housing. Well, if you look at the numbers of what's there, it's cheaper for a developer to just bulldoze farmland or woodland, because they also make money off those trees, by the way, than to clean up a former, whatever building was there. And we need to focus on repurposing those properties versus just, there comes a point where you just got to stop because people getting flooded out. Like my community, and I have to give props to Modena. Modena, we are conservation minded, protecting, restoring the health.
Population 600.
Yeah, and educating, because our community is the smallest and poorest in Chester County, and one of the poorest and smallest in the Commonwealth. And every structure that's built above us, to the west or to the east of us, affects us. And Hurricane Ida, we got a lot of damage at our farm. We are fortunate we're up on the hill. I had friends rescued by boat. And you got to be, I think, we as an American society have gotten into this instant gratification. We always need to have this new thing, this here, and this here. But there's a cost. Not only the environmental cost, you've got your ambulances take longer to get where they need. I have been on Route 52 between 926 and Route 1 and have watched ambulances fight for 20 to 30 minutes to get through traffic to get to an emergency call.
Sure.
Delayed care equals death. More auto accidents. That's why Pennsylvania, nationwide no longer writes new home or auto policies, because the loss, insurance is about insuring risk. I'm a former claims adjuster for Nationwide. And there comes a point, and we just saw it in California, can't do it. You can't do the risk. When you have houses that are being put up that burn to the ground within minutes, you can't, it just drains everything. It makes all of ours go up. And I know people, we need more affordable housing in Chester County. That boat has sailed. You will never see that again. When I was young, and I'm 48 years old. I remember.
But a young 48.
Yeah, thank you. So I remember, and I'm sure you remember, Barry, when you could get a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house and rent it for $750 in Chester County.
Oh, yeah.
And not anymore. And people, there's always a talk amongst the farm communities and just the self-employed and those that have their own businesses, is that it's driven up. Every new building drives stuff up.
If I didn't own my own property, I couldn't afford to live in this county. It would be impossible for me to do it. Yeah. I couldn't do it. We're getting a little far off.
We're going off.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
We've drifted off.
I digress. Let's get back to farming, so we can.
Yeah, so let's talk about
farming.
That.
It helps. It brings community together. It helps your environment. You've got our historical culture. And even if you date back before William Penn, the Lenape were farmers. And what a great way, and I'm part Cherokee, so what a great way to honor their history, their memory, than to support the agriculture that they did. They were quite prolific farmers.
Sure.
And,
absolutely.
And it just, and its studies have shown when you're going into like the psychology and whatnot of young children, giving them purpose, it's meaningful work, being outside. It's a valuable skill because regardless of prices going up and down, if you grow your own tomatoes, peppers, you know how to can potatoes. And they're easy things because anybody even on the porch of their apartment complex, their little balcony, you can grow potatoes.
Now, see, that's an interesting thing you just said about farming. I think we need to step back on that. there's a certain pride and self-satisfaction with planting something and making it grow, right? And there can be challenges to that because you can get a fungus and it can die right there if it's not getting enough light and that type of thing, or if you overwater it.
Yes.
So it's a finesse. It's like anything else. The first time you do something, you drop the ball. Second time you do it, you drop the ball, but not as bad. So it takes time, and some people get disgruntled with it. But, I think everybody should actually grow some plants from seeds and learn how to do it for self-sufficiency. If nothing else, for the mere pride of being able to nurture something through fruition, to be able to grow your tomatoes, grow your cucumbers, do whatever to actually make it a skill that you have, a certain knowledge to become one with nature, if you will, to figure that out. And anybody can do that. You can do that on your windowsill in your apartment.
Yes. And we're seeing a resurgence, and especially now with urban agriculture.
Mm-hmm. They're doing it on rooftops. They're doing all sorts of things.
And there are a lot of states, and it's sad you see that the states have to do that. It's the right, beyond like Pennsylvania's right to farm and acres laws and homesteading laws. It's literally in the constitutions of these states. They're saying you have the right to grow and raise your own food as a sovereign being. Something so common sense, so basic, is now more and more states are going to that route because, I always have found it ironic. People you'll see, those mushroom flies or those horses or those cows, the milk trucks coming. I'm like, first of all, where do you think you get your food? And those animals and that lifestyle is doing more for your whole society as a whole than anything else. Mm-hmm. So that's what I've always found so ironic. And anybody who wants to learn, I have people that email me on the farm page all the time. How do I do this? How do I do that? What can I do? Even if you are... Do
you change that into a Q&A on a web page or something so that once it's done, you don't have to answer it again?
I have not done a Q&A on my page. I have people that just email me.
Once you write it out, it's already done.
That's true.
You could be putting it up there.
That's a good idea.
That would save a lot of effort.
To do. And that's a good idea. I'll have to do that because people are asking, what can we do? And I said, you start doing your basic seeds and whatnot. And even if you're not as comfortable growing your own, say, lettuce or whatnot, I'll see people, they do go to the local farms, the local farmers markets. But even if you put pots of native clone flowers, mountain mint, things that help pollinators on your apartment balcony, that's helping farmers and that's helping you.
How do you feel about the hydroponic way of growing things?
I don't know a lot about it. Mm-hmm. I have read about it, and I think it's I do like dirt. I like water in a respective term. Mm-hmm. I'm not into super deep water and big bridges that span.
Right.
I have a healthy respect for them having, they're built. What gets built can come down.
That's
My
right.
grandfather was in the Navy, and he was a farmer. So it's but I think that's something very... very interesting. I think it could be a good use because there's a lot of native tribes that did that. Mm-hmm. They'd make these rafts and have them on the creek and grow food.
What about the vertical gardens?
I have seen some of those. I think they're fine.
I think they're fascinating. The tomatoes, things like that.
People are getting cattle panels now, and they're making archways out of them. And I think it's
a good use of space. Really,
exactly.
Right? I mean, so you don't need a lot of space in order to grow a lot of product.
I have a pet sitting client. They live in a townhome, and they grow their own food. Potatoes, tomatoes. She cans a lot, gets a lot of plants that once you harvest what's ready, it'll reproduce more food. And it's just amazing to see because they just all this food, because there are so many people that want to farm, but you can't compete with Toll Brothers and Ryan Homes throwing millions of dollars at farmers that go up for sale.
Well, it's also the crop that you only grow once, right?
Yeah.
A house. You put it up and move on.
Yeah, yeah, and it's like, and they can't. Well, I digress. Those houses don't last that long. They fall apart, and then you got to rebuild them. So it's the perfect Ponzi scheme because it's going to fall apart or burn to the ground, and you're going to have to rebuild it in 15 years. But it just, you have a lot of people that want to do this because the joke is when you get to zucchini and yellow squash harvesting season, you have so many that you might find somebody throw it in your car because there's so much.
We've actually done that at our office.
You're like, here,
hey, we just did a job for you, and guess what? You get 2 zucchini besides. You're like, what? Take the zucchini.
And it's so important to foster this. And I wish more schools, because I went to Octorara, and I'll never forget, Mrs. Kime was my kindergarten teacher.
That's farming territory out there in Octorara.
Well, we're trying to keep it that way, but they Mrs. Kime was the daughter of farmers, and we grew.
So she was the farmer's daughter? How cool.
She was so cool. But Mrs. Kime taught us kids how to grow vegetables.
Right.
And chickens, how to raise chickens. And we did a field trip to a local farm, and just to see the security, because my dad's mother grew up in Sharon Hill, which is obviously a little more urban.
Yeah, not to be confused with Fallcroft.
Crawford.
Yeah,
yes, exactly.
They're one of the same.
She was from Sharon Hill, and they had chickens, and you kept them in the basement at night. So they would let them out in their little yard during the day, and you're talking the Great Depression.
Eat the bugs and all that.
Eat the ticks. Your yard waste. Your waste. They eat your yard waste. They eat scraps from the table. It's not going into dumps.
Old watermelon rinds, everything.
Yeah, and they brought it in, and you have eggs. She goes, we were self-sufficient, and her family actually also had meat birds, because your meat birds are only living, depending on the breed, about 8 to 10 weeks before they're harvested for meat. You know, a friend of mine who was also a farmer in the Coatesville area, he did meat birds, a batch of meat birds, and when he worked out the cost of what feed they did get, in addition to the food scraps and whatnot, it cost $2.60 per bird, was it. Can you imagine you go even to get chicken at the grocery store.
How about chicken wings? The junk of the chicken is the most expensive part now.
Yeah. It's like, so you look at it and you get a whole bird and it's $2.60 and you've raised it yourself. Yeah. And there are people that you take them and they process them. There's also some mobile processors that'll come and do it.
My mom used to have to chop the heads off the birds.
My mother,
Depression era.
My mother does not like chickens because she remembers her grandmother and her mother doing that and them chasing the chickens.
The chickens would run around without a head. When they say you're running around like a chicken with your head cut off, ladies and gentlemen, that's true.
It's literally. And just to see if you had like for us, like we're working towards getting more established, but theoretically, and my husband being the Marine and whatnot. Farming is a homeland security issue. It's so important because he's like, if you control the food and if you can hinder it, you control life.
People. That's right.
So with our 24 acres, we can sustain, if we had to, we could sustain. And luckily, a lot of the properties, like there's properties that are over 5 acres that adjoin us, 4 acres as you go up South Brandywine. I know you're familiar with it. The audience may not be. Modena can be self-sufficient. And we can also feed the city of Coatesville proper. We could feed Valley Township. We could also feed Parksburg. So it's very important.
The yields are good.
Yeah.
The yields are good for
that. And it really, when you start thinking of that, it's just really important. And that's why I had put, last year, our group we did get the Environmental Conservation Committee formed in Modena. We're looking at not only the conservation of the environment, but of the agricultural history, the history of it. And agriculture just makes people get involved, because now if you have a miniature Highland cow, they rent them out for $250 an hour for photo sessions.
Really?
For a mini Highland cow.
Wow. Cool. Well, any of that would be. Well, tell me one last thing, because we're going to have to wrap up here. Governmental assistance. Do you look towards governmental assistance at all? Is there anything out there, or is it bad news to go that way?
It is. For us, we apply for grants that are private, that are through private organizations, whether it be veterans, whether it be like the Leopold Foundation has a conservation award. That's what we do. Because I've looked, people they're like, oh, you can get this through the federal government. Well, they send you a contract, and you can't do this, and you can't do that, and
the strings that are so.
And we had looked at it, and it's like when they said they wanted us to do that, and my husband, being the Marine, was like, he's like, you know what? You go stop Toll Brothers and developers, then tell me what, as a regenerative farmer that's saving this environment, what we can or cannot do. So for me personally, private donations, that's why it's so important. Buy gift certificates from your local farmers. Everybody loves our peonies are going to be starting coming in May. Woo-hoo. And daffodils and allium. Buy gift certificates when offered by these local farms. We're going to have seed starts and things like that.
That's like a pre-investment.
Yeah, that way we don't have to look at, and I know there's a lot of farmers that do look at the USDAs, but there's a lot of red tape. And for me personally, going through private foundations where people have donated that money willingly, it's not taking it from the elderly widow down the street,
right? Taking
it via taxes through force,
right?
And saying, here, we're going to give it to Betty Smith. Because even in those federal grants, there was a big controversy. So there's an urban ag grant, block grant that you can get. So it was given to a farm that the farmer didn't own in Westtown Township. It's owned by the school. One of the income of that community.
Does it still exist?
What?
Does that farm still? I mean, does
well,
the
it's got a new person. He retired. So somebody else is leasing it. So they don't even own it.
I remember
$670,000.
Houlihan granted that. Yes, Houlihan granted that.
Because
there's some questionable things going on.
Because when you have also a school that has, a considerable endowment, you've got a community that is 97% wealthier than most Americans. Because people had called over on our behalf. They're like, you've got a disabled vet, check box. You've got a Cherokee woman, check box for Cherokee, check box for women. That's check. Check.
Right.
Poorest community in your district, check. Near the railroad, check. History, check. Ruined by Hurricane Ida, check. Lost most of their business due to Hurricane Ida, check. And
this sounds like a slam dunk, and yet it isn't.
And so when people called over and they're like, Jen, you should call over. And when I called over, and they're like, oops, we didn't know you exist. I said, how do you not know exist? Because I'm always emailing and always calling.
Yeah, that representative will never talk to me. I've inquired to them many times.
So, and I think that's why, and that keyways into our little segment, that why Americans are getting pissed about government waste. Because that grant shouldn't have been awarded to there. It should have found its way to a farmer like us. And there's other farmers like us. But
there's lots of you.
There's lots of us. And there's lots of check in the political game. But our farm being successful would do wonders for our community, would bring in employment, therapeutic programs for veterans and others, educational opportunities for the local community, veterans, kids, because we do that. I've helped scouts with seed starting and donate to our local communities and get involved. It would enable me to enable us to donate more to help support things like was talked about, fire departments, EMS. But it takes community, and it takes standing up, and it takes and I do a lot of research just by way that I am. And if we can start drawing more and get more attention and give people more of a connection, they always say, know your farmer, know their face, that maybe that can help change things for the better for everyone. But, yeah.
Okay. I think that's a good place to end this. I'd like to say thank you, Jenny Hines, for coming on today. And Jenny would like to remind you, if you'd like to become a farmer and make $1 million, start with $5 million. So, thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, thank you for having me.
You got it. I would like to thank you for being on here, along with what was his name again? Eric Olson, coming on, doing his counterpoint.
Yeah.
We're going to see what's going on with that. And so, thanks to Eric Olson. And also, thanks to Eric Clambera, my producer here on All Politics Are Local. I asked him if I could hang out with him this weekend, and he said,
how about new?
You are an acquired taste, Barry.
Yeah, dude, it's me. It's your buddy. It's Barry. Hey, Mondays and Wednesdays, Eric and I are together for the morning show, and be sure to check out this coming week when we talk about something interesting.
Right.
Hey, I'm preaching to the choir here, but for my first-time listeners, local radio is where you need to tune in. We have your back. We tell you what's happening in your area and what affects you most. Philly doesn't care about you. Those Philly radio stations care about Philly, city stuff. And city stuff, they don't talk about farmers, right? That's unless their shows are, syndicated and shipped to you from someplace like Dallas. Support the local businesses and the locally grown food that we've been talking about. You ever eat any food they grow in Philly? Didn't think so. But your friends, your neighbors, the local advertisers, they have what you need and they care about you. Local businesses are your neighbors and your friends. Support those that sponsored WCHE. They are our community. If you don't got community, well, good luck with that. Hey, if you like my show, take the time to send a nice note to WCHE at WCHE1520.com. That's our AM side. If my show, if it gives you a little bit of anxiety,
you can't handle the truth.
Yeah, that's right. As always, thank you to the best-looking general manager of AM and FM radio in downtown Westchester, Donna Saul, from right here at WCHE. It's her quick decision-making that brings you programming like mine, which is why most people keep telling her to slow down. Be sure to like and follow WCHE's Facebook page, where you keep up on what's happening around the town and in the county. You can also see my updates and videos on both my Facebook page, which is WCHE All Politics Are Local with Barry D, and my YouTube channel, All Politics Are Local with Barry D. Today's intro and outro music was from, you ready for this, Jenny? Bob Seger and the Silver Bullet Band with their 1987 song Shakedown, #1 Billboard Hot 100. That song was used in the film Beverly Hills Cop 2 with Eddie Murphy.
I remember that.
Yeah,
movie.
See, there you go.
And Ed would have known that song.
Yeah, but it's not here, so that doesn't count. And the final advice of the day, most people think that character and reputation are the same thing. Character is who you are. Reputation is who people think you are. Be of good character and don't worry about what other people think. I know a lot of people with good character that others tried to smear with their version of reputation. Eventually, character shines through. Do the right things. That's character. I'm Barry D for All Politics Are Local. Thanks for listening.